Okay, today we have Sahmira Najiinda, PhD candidate from Makarere University, Kampala, Uganda, presenting her paper towards a process model of entrepreneurial well-being. And we will have as a main discussant, Professor Andreana Drencheva from the King's College in London. She's an expert in social entrepreneurship, particularly entrepreneurial personality and emotions, and she also worked on women entrepreneurs' well-being. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion, and also welcome our guest for today. We will have 5 to 10 minutes at the end to hear your comments and feedback. Great. Now, without further ado, Sahmira, please, you can start your presentation.
So thank you, Alessia. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, the other participants, for making it here for this series today. I hope I'm clear and I hope my screen is visible. I'm Sahmira Najiinda, just like Alessia has put it, PhD candidate at Makarere University, that is Uganda. And today the paper I'm looking at is towards a process model of entrepreneurial well-being, insights from the entrepreneurial journey of women entrepreneurs in Uganda. The motivation for this study, we note that the well-being of women is a great concern for different stakeholders across the globe. Just like we see that SDGs, particularly SDG 5, prioritizes gender equality and empowerment of women. When we look at its indicators, targets rather closely, target 5.4, which is looking at shared responsibility in the household and family, target 5.5 of SDG 5, that is looking at participation of women in decision-making in the different aspects. When it comes to Uganda, we have Vision 2040 that focuses on gender equality and women's empowerment as a prerequisite to transform the society socially and economically. And the government has further put up different programs to help the women, and these include the Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Programme, the Parish Development Model, and these are basically to provide them with the financial services, skill them, provide value addition to their goods and services, as well as marketing them. This has actually made many women take on different entrepreneurial activities, but we note that the impact on their well-being is not that much noticed, or there's some effects on their well-being. And we are saying the impact is more in the urban areas and not that much felt in the rural areas. Engagement with literature shows that the well-being of women entrepreneurs is not that much tapped into or that much explored. And most of the studies that are trying to look at well-being or entrepreneurial well-being of women entrepreneurs are basically on the antecedents. When we look at studies like Marshall et al., then those that are looking at the outcomes, and then some other studies are just meta-analytical in nature and just being literature-based. When we look at the definition of entrepreneurial well-being, because somebody would ask, what do we understand or mean by entrepreneurial well-being? Study by Wickland conceptualizes it as the experience of satisfaction, positive affect, and then the infrequent negative affect, psychological functioning in relation to developing, starting, growing, and running an entrepreneurial venture. From the definition, we note that the different stages within the entrepreneurial journey and the different aspects of well-being that keep changing. That is the satisfaction with life, the positive affect, and then the negative affect. And the psychological functioning basically looks at the self-acceptance of these women, the development of their autonomy, their competencies, and development of a sense of purpose in life. Further, Reef and Shearer and Reef recognize that there's a need for a longitudinal study to explore the changes in well-being of entrepreneurs along the entrepreneurial journey, because like we know that the entrepreneurial journey is never a smooth one. There are normally those ups and downs, just like a roller coaster, and there is need to investigate how the different aspects of well-being keep changing over time along this journey. Studies that have studied well-being some have focused on a particular state. For example, when you look at Lanivich et al. 2021, they focused on early stage entrepreneurs, meaning a study that could look at them at the early stage, then as they progress, could actually add great impact in line with entrepreneurial well-being. Well-being has got two aspects or dimensions, that is the subjective well-being and the eudaimonic well-being. The subjective is the one that is basically subjective in nature. We are looking at, are these women satisfied with their life? Are they able to provide the basic needs that they need? And then are they able to have that feeling of being happy, less stressed, less depressed as they run their businesses? That is the subjective well-being. Then the other aspect of well-being is the eudaimonic well-being, where we are looking at self-actualization of an individual. That is where we're looking at their autonomy or independence, their competence. Are they able to develop competences to become better by the day? Are they able to have a sense of purpose in life or meaning in life? And then do they have that vitality or the energy that keeps them going? So when you look at studies, they have mainly focused on the subjective. When we talk of well-being, they're more onto the subjective aspect, and they're paying less attention to the eudaimonic aspect. Yet to really talk about well-being, we need to have all those two aspects captured together. So in addressing all those gaps identified contextually and also in literature, the study seeks to answer the research question, how and why does the well-being of women entrepreneurs in rural Uganda evolve over time? The methodology that we adopted, this study is conducted in Uganda, which is in the east of Africa, particularly in the Luwero district, because there are cases of women who really report lower well-being. And women in this area are normally engaged in activities like operating restaurants, bars, retail shops. They do local alcohol production and sale. They also operate snack kiosks and grocery stores, among others. This study aims to develop a process theory or model, as we also indicated it in the title, where we want to see how this well-being keeps changing from the start of the business up to a given stage where they're actually straining to have these ventures sustainably grow or exist. The study is qualitative in nature, and we want to develop a theory basing on what we find from the field, adopting a multiple case study where we had 10 women entrepreneurs selected purposively from the area. And these women were selected on the basis that they're just starting their entrepreneurial status or journey, because we want to follow them over time. So we selected those entrepreneurs that are just starting, that is 1 to 12 months, and not one beyond, such that we have a chance to keep visiting them and see how this well-being has evolved. The unit of analysis is the entrepreneurial well-being, like we are saying, along the journey to see how it keeps changing. And we are actually observing the women entrepreneurs in rural Uganda. Data collection is in 3 phases, and to report, 2 phases have been conducted so far. After 12 months, we're able to get back and trace the changes in the well-being. So phase 1, we had 10 women entrepreneurs selected. And when we went to do a follow-up in phase 2, we actually realized that out of the 10 that we had initially, we could only trace 7. The 3 had actually failed, and they were not in the businesses anymore due to some of the reasons that we tried to pick from there. And we are trying, the 3rd phase is not yet done, but we are planning to do it in after the next 12 months, which will be in December. So the results presented are in line with the research question, how and why the well-being of women entrepreneurs in rural Uganda evolves over time. And from the results, we had 2 pathways that emerged. The enhancing pathway, where we see that the well-being improves Then the hampering pathway, where we see that the well-being reduces. And then we have variations or reasons for the variations in well-being. That is the how. So the how, we are seeing that the different pathways that are taken. And then the why, we should be able to find out reasons why that particular pathway results. So in the phase 1, that was at the startup, that is 1 to 12 months, we had the enhancing pathway. So here, the well-being of the women entrepreneurs was being enhanced because we saw they were able to meet their personal needs, those of their children and the entire family. Even with the neglect of their spouses, they could survive because they had something in their pockets to take care that made them more happy and move on with life. Then we have the established relationships with others. For example, their customers, their suppliers, and this gave them a sense of belonging in society, and it kept them happy and moving. They got employed because many of the women indicated that they were yearning to get a source of employment. So when they got that, they actually felt a sense of achievement, and that is the enhancing well-being pathway. They could also fulfill their dual role of looking after the family and the business, because these women entrepreneurs are basically doing the entrepreneurial activities near their homes. So you find somebody has a two-roomed house, and at the back of the house, that is where they're residing, and then in front, they do the business. So they're actually able to balance the home and the family business activities. And some of the reasons we see for this enhancing pathway, we see there is that autonomy. These women entrepreneurs indicated that they're able, some of them are able to do whatever they want to do. They're able to decide when to rest, when to do particular activities, and what activities to put in their businesses. They also indicated the aspects of having peace because they don't have to get stressed with their neglectful or spouses that are not supportive. But when they have that money with them, they feel that peace with them. Then the social networks, they also had another reason for that enhancing pathway. So still in phase 1, there is a hampering pathway or a reducing pathway. What leads to this or indicators? We have them not making sales because they indicated that at the start of their businesses, the customers are still few, they're not yet used to them, and then the sales are still minimal. They have discouragement by residents and family because some people don't want to see others prosper, as they indicated, and they keep discouraging them that this business will not stay even for a year. They say these things you're bringing are not working for the family, and then rather for the people in the community, and also some members of the family keep discouraging them. Like we had one who was saying that the mother kept discouraging her, that I told you not to do this business, you insisted, now you see it is not working. So all those actually lead to stress and depression amongst them, which is the hampering pathway. The other is the losses as a result of their items being spoiled in the stores, being that the customers are still few. These items get spoiled in the store, like some of them are perishable, like those in the vegetables. Then the other reason for the hampering pathway, they had spouse interference, especially those that are married. The man comes in and they want to take over or control the business, even when they didn't participate or help in that starting of the business, which actually goes on to stress them in a way. They want to control how they are managing their proceeds, yet they actually had no participation in the starting of the business. The other reason indicated for the reducing pathway or hampering pathway is limited capital. These women are really limited in capital. They have very little money, and this keeps them to get loans, which loans are also stressing them to pay because the monies they're getting or the sales are still less, yet the people who lend them the money need their money with interest back. So this actually was a stressful factor to them. They also have the aspect of bad debtors, people who come to borrow and then they disappear without coming to pay the money. The other aspect that leads to the hampering pathway is the seasonality of the businesses. For example, the ones that are selling items to use in agriculture, like most of the people there are working in agriculture activities. They need the pesticides, the chemicals to spray and all that. So in case it's not a season for farming, these items are going to get spoiled in the store. There's a case of a woman who indicated that the rats actually ate up the powdered chemicals, and that was all spoiled before they could be bought. So that was in the phase 1, and phase 2, that is after a year, we saw that the same pathways were still maintained, but then the different reasons or indicators for those pathways. One, in the enhancing pathway, we note that they were being kept on improving, and we saw that they had business diversification from the proceeds collected in the groups because they keep saving. So from the business proceeds, they were able to invest in animal rearing and other activities that could generate them more money. So they were not actually depending on one activity, but they invested in goats and other animal rearing activities, which actually added onto their income. Then they also had their businesses expand. We noted, or we saw from the pictures, that where one had a vegetable stall that was small, they were able to expand it and add more items or products. And where we had one that had shelves that are halfway full, by the next visit, the shelves were actually full with more items. And they were saying through what customers were demanding for, they got that chance to bring it and add to their product. So the business has expanded and worked better, which made them happier and attain their needs as well as improve their well-being. The construction of the houses, because they had this as a goal, some of them were into rentals and they were saying at least we need to have a plot and then construct our house. So those that we interacted with in the first phase, and they were saying at least they had a plot and they needed to construct. By the time we went back, they were saying that construction work was actually moving on, and they were happy that they were actually achieving that. Then with the experience they had attained and the status they have, of course, when you have that business, everybody knows you're earning something, they have that trust in you, and the picture at which they're looking at you in society is actually a different one. So they trusted them and even gave them leadership roles. For example, one indicated that she's a church treasurer. With a post, she indicated that it couldn't be given to anybody else who didn't have a business activity or a source of income. They can't trust you with their money. What if you go away with it? So that gives them that happiness. Then they see that at least there is some hope in life, and also gives them the self-acceptance for enhancing a well-being pathway. They gained confidence in these operations because, you know, after a year of operating, you know where to improve and where the challenges are and where you can work better. For example, one who was saying that there are customers who come and then they're disturbing. When they drink a lot, they spoil the property. They want to spoil or break the bottles, break the chairs. This one was able to find ways of handling these customers. So they got more knowledge, which is the aspect of competencies. And with these competencies, they actually became relevant to society. They would help others. In case somebody has a challenge in business, they would advise them here and there. And this actually makes them feel relevant in society and keeps them happy. Some of the reasons for this pathway is the self-confidence that they developed, and then they need the need to achieve. When they have this need to achieve a number of goals, they actually really strive to achieve them. And as they achieve them, they actually get happy. And that is the enhanced well-being pathway. Still in phase 2, we see that the hampering pathway was also maintained. And this was a result of enmity in the community. In this community, people reported that people do not want to see one prosper or grow or become better than them. And they realized that those that were friends to them in the first place and they used to gossip here and here, when they see they're progressing, they actually begin talking ill about them in the community. And those that were close friends actually turn out to be enemies. And this actually makes someone not feel happy, or it actually bothers them. The other is business closure. Some indicated that where they had two parts of the business, like we had one who had a hardware as well as dealing in the agricultural produce, they were able to close the hardware because the business was not making sales. There were few customers demanding for them, and they were actually not getting too much profits to them, so they closed. And this made some people happy because when they see you actually not progressing, but actually sort of going backwards, they feel happier, which is actually not making you happy as a person. The other aspect that was also resulting to the hampering pathway is witchcraft. Within this community, there are very many cases of witchcraft, where if people see that one is prospering, they would want to do whatever it takes for you to be put down. And those that we asked why their neighbor actually moved away, they indicated that the reasons were to do with witchcraft, and that is why they ended up closing and leaving the place. The other still reason for the hampering pathway gets into the low sales and bad data. We also have the absence of power. This is a village that is striving to get hydroelectric power, and sometimes they're using the solar energy, which is not adequate. So even when they want to bring in more machines that are operated with electricity, they fail to do so, which makes the businesses not progress to a level they desire. The other one is increasing rent or failure to parent, even that sometimes the proceeds are not so much or little. They're not able to pay the rent, and then that aspect of the loan, the landlady or landlord disturbing here and there, reduces their happiness. And the other aspect is the jealousy, like we've indicated, people don't want to see others prosper. Yes. Thank you so much for your attention. That is what I had to share.
Thank you very much, Sahmira, for the presentation. I will leave the floor to Adi for her feedback now. And I see already in the chat, Mohammed has also provided some good comments and reference, and we can look at them after Adi's discussion. Thanks.
Hi, Sahmira. Thank you so much for sharing your research. I'll start with two comments. The first one is you're the expert on your data and your context and your project. So take my feedback and maybe other people's feedback as kind of a gift that you can discard, a gift that you can partially use, a gift that you can reflect on and then make decisions, or a gift that you just want to return back to the show. I think that's the first thing to say about feedback. And the second thing is I have a list of things that I would like to share with you. But as someone who has researched feedback, I know that it's most useful when it addresses questions you may have. So instead of imposing the feedback that I have on you, I want to start the discussion by asking you what would be most useful to you? What are the questions you have at the moment, or the uncertainties that you have about this project that would be useful to use this platform as kind of a brainstorming session where you can answers, ideas, potential solutions from our perspective and all the baggage that we bring. So those are my two comments. And I guess the second one is very much a question. What would be useful to you today?
Professor's network is breaking. Is it on my side?
I think it's on my side as well, but I don't know about the others.
It might be on my side. I'm really sorry. It says that.
But maybe I can translate in the meanwhile. Sahmira, she asked, she would like to frame it more as a discussion, and if you have something to share, like what questions do you have now? What would help you the most?
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. What I would ask maybe is to seek guidance on the feasibility of the study. Is it worth? Maybe also to look out for what could be the other aspects I could look out for in the next phase, given that I've conducted phase 1 and 2. There could be some other aspects maybe that could be looked out for in the third phase. I could get guidance on that. And also maybe on the pathways developed, what could be the feedback? Are they in line with the study, or we could make them better?
So let's start with our final point around the pathways. I think the idea of having a process model around how women entrepreneurs maintain their well-being, develop their well-being, or any other agentic point around how they are in control of their well-being is really interesting. I think a lot of the research focuses kind of on static factors that influence well-being, and this idea of well-being as something that women entrepreneurs can control is really interesting. And from that perspective, I think the pathways can be very impactful theoretically as well as practically. One thing that I couldn't understand from the paper, and admittedly I had only access to the short version of the paper, so maybe no longer version of the paper, some of these questions are answered. But I didn't know whether these are two pathways where different women kind of belong. So once you start on the enhancement pathway, you maintain that pathway, or whether there are a lot more turning points and trigger points, so to speak, where you can be on an enhancement pathway, but still then go on the hindering pathway, depending on the factors. And to me, it wasn't really clear how much of these pathways are actually comparisons of two different groups of women or two different types of external factors versus a process model where you can have upward as well as downward spirals. I think if you can develop those upward and downward spirals of your pathways, that would be really, really impactful theoretically, because then you can have a mix of both external factors, like how other people respond to the women, for example, their spouses who might be neglecting them, or the jealousy of community members and so forth. But you can also have internal factors, how the women develop self-confidence, how they enjoy the autonomy they have and so forth. And I think that's really, really powerful. But at the moment, I also think that there's a little bit of a disconnect between your research questions and the funding section. And what I mean by this is that the reader expects a process model of women entrepreneurs' well-being, but what you deliver is factors that shape how women's well-being may change over the entrepreneurship process. I don't know whether that's really clear as a distinction, but at the moment you're comparing different stages of the entrepreneurial process versus comparing how women's well-being actually changes over time. And in the findings, there's very little actually about the women's well-being. You don't really tell us what their well-being is at different stages of these pathways, which is really where a lot more nuance is needed. Does that make sense in terms of that question around the pathways?
Yes, it makes sense. I'm trying to pick something. I think maybe I could be guided on how to because the question is how and why the entrepreneurial being changes or evolves over time. And I thought I'm answering the how by giving those pathways, and then the why by giving those reasons as to why that particular pathway is taken. And including that in phase 1, this is what was revealed. And phase 2, this is what was revealed. And probably after phase 3, I'll also be able to indicate what was revealed.
Yes, I guess when you think about changes to women's well-being or women entrepreneurs' well-being, is you have to show the reader the changes. You actually have to show the reader this is where their well-being is at the different stages. At the moment, you're actually showing us the patterns. Their well-being either improves or gets hindered, but you're not showing us how their well-being is at the different stages, which would make the paper a lot more credible if you can show the reader that there are these changes to their well-being. But the other thing that's related to this, and it's more of a methodological than a theoretical aspect, is you're assuming that your phases 1, 2, and 3, which are phases of your data collection, align with the different stages of the entrepreneurship process. You're assuming that stage 1 is startup, phase 2 is growth, and phase 3 is sustainability.
Yes.
But there's a lot of research to show that these phases can take various points of time. So you can be in phase 1 of the startup for 3, 4, 5 years. It's not as linear as it takes a year. So I think it would be a lot stronger if you just drop these phases, because they're an artifact of your data collection. They're not theoretically driven. And just focus on the process model. How does their well-being change over time? Because the other thing is that you can have well-being changes within a phase. You can have women entrepreneurs' well-being fluctuating up and down, even during just the startup phase. So you're kind of limiting yourself when you're aligning your data collection phases with how their well-being changes. It would be a lot richer if you just look at changes across different time points. And you might have 4 different time points in your first point of data collection, for example, just as something that may occur in your data set.
Okay. I get that.
And I know that you had another question, because I answered your second question, or attempted to answer your second question. I'm sorry, I don't remember the first one. Can you remind me, please, so this can actually be useful to you? It was something about feasibility and what you should be looking for in phase 3. Is that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So this will probably be very difficult to hear because it's not something that's easily addressable. But I think there are 2 things. The first one is, realistically speaking, you need a larger data set, you need a larger sample, which is really, really difficult to hear at this stage because you've already spent 2 years collecting data, and adding more participants to your sample kind of extends the data collection process. So I don't know whether that would be feasible, but if it's possible, it's something that I would very strongly encourage you to do. Particularly if these pathways are kind of comparison points, where you have a group of women on the first pathway, a group of women on the second pathway. Essentially, you end up with about 3 or 4 women in each pathway, which would be really difficult to convince any reviewer that that would be sufficient for data saturation or theoretical saturation. If that's not feasible, if possible, it would be fantastic if you can access the women who close their ventures for your final data collection point. Because even though they've closed their ventures, one of the reasons may have been changes to their well-being. And that might give you a lot more data on the hampering pathway and how this pathway can be a lot more nuanced than simply showing how entrepreneurship is very difficult. Like the downside of entrepreneurship, as Mohammed said, you might lose financially, it might create conflict within your family and so forth. But if you have access to those 3 women who dropped out, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Yes, I actually wanted to find out these women, but the time was there, they didn't have contacts to share.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the phones with them. So this information we only got from their neighbors that they relocated due to issues to do with the witchcraft and all that. So we actually couldn't trust them.
Okay. But I think, okay, so that means that you can't really access them. How feasible is it for you to grow your sample and collect data from more women starting from essentially the first phase? Is that a possibility given where you are in your PhD?
You're saying adding on to getting those who are still at the start and adding to this? Then I still have to follow them.
Exactly, that's the challenge, that in terms of your timeline, it would extend the data collection process. Because at the moment, your sample is very small. And it's fair to say that by the time you go back in the field in December, more of these women may no longer be accessible. You may lose even further numbers of your participants.
It's a bit tricky. Maybe I'll look into it.
Exactly. This is why I hate giving you this feedback at this stage, because you're already 2 years into your data collection, and this feedback would have been much more actionable, 2 years ago. But I'm aware that any editor, particularly in kind of the journals that dominate the global north, would expect to see a much larger sample size, and they want you to be prepared for that feedback. So if that's not possible because of where you are in your PhD, it really puts the pressure on you to be a lot more methodologically robust and methodologically clear, to really explicate the theoretical puzzle that you're working with. Because at the moment, a lot of the framing is very much about women's entrepreneurs' well-being is important. How do we get to know more about that? But there isn't really something that can hook your reader. So if your sample size would be the biggest limitation of your study, then everything else has to be really, really strong. Everything else has to really stack up and meet the expectations of journals to be able to make a theoretical contribution. And I think this is where you really need to make the case clear for how women entrepreneurs in rural settings are not currently well equipped to, or we're not currently well equipped to understand their well-being based on the theories that we have access to. Because if you look at, there's so much research done on women and well-being and entrepreneurs and well-being. So you really have to carve out that niche to say, well, this is why women entrepreneurs in this specific context are special. This is why our theories don't work for them. And here you really need to emphasize the gender elements, which mean a lot more restrictions, barriers, fewer opportunities. The entrepreneurial part, which means a lot more demands and how these demands are continuously changing and shifting. And here you can build on that process perspective. And also the rural context or the challenging context, which is about much fewer resources or access to resources. But like there are dozens of theories on well-being. It puts a lot of pressure on you to carve out why exactly they don't work as well for these women that you're working with, to be able to then carve out that contribution. For the contribution, I think if you can develop a process model, that would be fantastic. But that process model needs to be much richer than hampering and enhancing well-being based on external factors, and a lot more around turning points and kind of upward and downward spirals. The other thing that you can work with is power. Like from a feminist perspective, you can work with power over, power to, power with, power within. And that might allow you to capture some of these nuances around jealousy, around working with others, building autonomy, the social connections that can give you a theoretical framework to work with that's a lot more robust and exciting. So I feel like I've had verbal diarrhea. But yeah, any of this that requires more explanation or anything that you'd like me to go a little bit more in depth in? Because I'm aware that these conversations are sometimes really overwhelming. You have people talking at you for long periods of time. And it might be really, really difficult to be reflective and think of what does this mean for my work and how can I actually make any of this actionable at this stage. Shall we open the floor to others? Sahmira, I do have notes. I'm more than happy to write up my notes and share with you. And also, you can take some time to reflect on these. If it would be useful to have another conversation, I'm more than happy to make the time to kind of answer questions you might have about my feedback or kind of brainstorm ideas together. Because I know that it can be really overwhelming to listen to other people tell you these are areas where your work can be improved. And it's a little bit like being an entrepreneur. Your work is your baby. It's like someone telling you your baby is ugly. You're like, this is really, really unfair. So I'll type up my notes after this and share with you. And if it will be useful, I'm more than happy to have another conversation at some point. But maybe at this stage, we can open the floor to others. I've seen in the comments, there are some really interesting comments around jealousy and witchcraft that you can also build on.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. I've really noted down these aspects and I'll be able to reflect or look at them further. And we shall be able to keep in touch. I'll be glad to get the written notes and go through deeply and analyze. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Adi, for also from my side. Thank you, Sahmira, for engaging in this conversation. Yeah, it's tough. It's hard to to listen to so many inputs, and it's not. You need time to reflect on them. So this platform is mostly. I see it as an opportunity to create relationship between the two of you, so that you can continue and bring this forward. Yeah, and now I'm really happy to also open the floor to comments and feedback from the other participants. Mohammed, you already put a lot of inputs in the chat. Do you want to summarize it or like highlight?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and thank you, Sahmira, for the presentation and for the fantastic study. I think what I struggled the most with is you argue that you want to follow how well-being evolves as the business develops, but what's
I don't know if it's me, but I don't hear you anymore. Okay, I think it's me.
of venture creation or entrepreneurial process that I'm going to look into well-being of these women in this context that will provide probably a bit more theoretical ground, I would say. Since this study aims at investigating how women's well-being evolves as it develops and matures over time, but we don't know on which basis are you following the business and whether there are differences in well-being when they start the business or when they face hurdles and so on. So that's the one thing I wanted to mention. And the other thing is more related to well-being itself. So the whole study is really centered on well-being. And I didn't stop myself, but keep wondering, how do you actually measure well-being? It's very tricky. Is it the meaning they attach to their well-being, or is it your own interpretation that this is well-being, the fact that they bought a new parcel of land, that's some sort of well-being, and so on. So it was very difficult to trace this variable, how it changes over time, if you don't know, if you don't say how you actually measure it. And I think in at least in the abstract, what I understood is verbal interviews, visual observation, and field notes. So It's much more very just what you think that this is well-being, but it might not be the case. Did you actually ask them if they feel better? So it may be that would be a more something that you could bring up more. And you also talk about observation or participant observation. So I was not sure whether this is more of an ethnography or more of a grounded theory, as you say. So these are the two things: the entrepreneurial process and how you measure well-being. And then all the hampering pathway, maybe what I noticed is that it just has to do more with how entrepreneurs experience failure in general, not specifically women entrepreneur in rural Uganda. It could apply anywhere. And I think that Andriana made that very clear. There's a lot of research on entrepreneurship and well-being and gender and well-being. So I don't know exactly where are you actually positioned in this literature, and what is the upfront theoretical framework that you bring in? Is it institutions? Because at the end you talk about witchcrafts, which is more of informal institutions. So it could be institutional theory, but also you talk about married versus unmarried. And that was also a methodological surprise to me, because you sampled on businesses at the startup phase, and then in the finding you say, well, there is differences also between married and unmarried. So if marriage is an interesting institution, and you think that upfront married women would be more free and more likely to develop their well-being compared to any married woman, that could be also an interesting criteria to bring up in the selection of the cases, rather than later in the results. If marriage as an institution is an important element in the study of rural women in general in Africa or in Uganda. I think that's all from my side.
Thank you, Mohammed. I've actually tried to pick some aspects from the chat. I'll internalize them later. And also, you're asking, how do I measure or conceptualize well-being? As basing on the definition by Wickland that I put in the background there, who looks at the aspect of life satisfaction in an essence of being able to meet their needs, their personal and those of the family, as well as the experiencing of positive affect, being happy, and then the infrequent effect of not being sad, depressed, and sleepless due to entrepreneurial activities, and also the aspect of attaining their independence, their competence, and having that sense of purpose, or feeling that life has meaning to them. That is what I was actually basing on to capture the well-being aspects within the women.
But do you ask them how they feel, or do you just make observation and from that you deduce that their well-being has improved or not improved?
I'll be asking them how particular activities are affecting them. How are they making them feel? Are they making them happy? What are those things that make them challenged or depressed or sleepless? So they would actually come out from the interviews asked.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it's more subjective well-being.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the feedback, Mohammed. I'm actually internalizing the others further to incorporate in the write-up.
Yeah, I see also Harold has a question in the chat on a similar note about how you measure well-being and how you, and I think you have replied, but because you have two people asking about this, maybe you should clarify a little bit more, especially methodologically, how you capture that. Yeah, because we have only 4 minutes before closing. Is there any other question from our, yeah, Said, hi, go on.
Well, hi, thank you. Congratulations. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Sahmira, for your presentation. It was very brilliant, and the thesis is very of value, specifically for entrepreneurs in Africa and women, specifically women. And we know something here in Morocco. We are promoting entrepreneurship in different countries, specifically in African countries. The idea of developing the process, the process theory is important because it could help us and help you modelize, the different stages of evolutions, and it would help decision makers eventually to see how they could help women at different stages to help them, succeed their businesses. Now, with respect to just an idea, maybe an input with respect to Mohammed's suggestion, yes, I agree with the fact that the concept of well-being is not well developed. Probably, maybe as a suggestion is just to have for Sahmira to have a conceptual framework for that concept, and from that they could see what could be the variables that would help them measure the concept of well-being, and at that time they could very easily observe and measure that concept. I mean, it would make it more scientific and methodologically robust.
Yeah, thank you again for the contribution. And maybe it would be also interesting, I don't know if that complicates things too much, but also to understand how people around these women understand their well-being, the change in their well-being, because then you will have just another perspective that tells you more about what in that community is considered well-being. And because they are always usually, as you said, describing jealousy, and these can be indicators of what it means to be better off when in a group.
Maybe our understanding of well-being is different from their understanding of well-being.
Exactly. So, okay. Then I also have some comments for you, Sahmira, but maybe I'll just send you some written notes. And I just want to use this final couple of minutes to say thank you again to Adi and to Sahmira to present your work, and to you for your nice contribution and suggestion. It's a pleasure to see that you engage so much with your fellow PhD students. So yeah, thank you so much. And we'll have other episodes in the coming weeks and months. So we'll just communicate the new dates. The next presenter, I think, is Sally, who is also here with us. I know she's not feeling very well, but next on stage is Sally, and she also works on women entrepreneurs in the context of Kenya, in this case. So thank you once again to all of you. Keep in touch, and have a nice, wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Keep on track. Bye.